She was already awake when the yard was still dark. Not restless, just awake. The way birds are awake, which is different from how you are. Complete, present, already reading the world before the world had fully started. She sat in the same oak she always sits in, third branch from the bottom, slightly left of center, where the bark is rough enough to grip without effort. She had been sitting in this exact spot, on and off, for almost 2 years. Not because she was told to, because this branch, from this angle, showed her everything she needed to see. The back door, the feeder, the chair on the porch, and the window. The one with the light that came on first every morning. She watched the light. It hadn't come on yet. Most mornings, the light came on at the same time. Give or take a few minutes, but close enough that her body had started to expect it. Not consciously. She didn't think about it the way you think about things. It was more like a rhythm she had absorbed without meaning to. The yard had a pulse, and she knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. Not by paying attention, but by noticing immediately when it changes. This morning, it was late. Not by much, maybe 12 minutes, maybe 15. But she noticed. She didn't move. She just adjusted her attention. The way you might look up from what you're doing when a sound stops that you didn't realize you'd been hearing. Something was different today. She didn't know what. She didn't need to know what. She just filed it away in whatever part of a bird's brain collects small irregularities and holds them, quietly, for later. The light came on. She watched. He came outside later than usual. She saw him before he saw her, which was almost always how it went. Birds see first. They see more. They see differently, technically. Her eyes processed ultraviolet light, registered movement at a speed his brain couldn't match, and tracked him from the moment the door opened without ever appearing to look directly at him. From where she sat, he was not just a shape. He was a collection of signals. Speed, posture, the angle of his head, the way his weight shifted as he walked. And today, all of those signals were wrong. Not dangerous wrong. She knew dangerous. Dangerous was fast and unpredictable, with sharp attention and direct eye contact and energy that moved outward, toward things. This wasn't that. This was the opposite of that. This was slow in a way that had nothing to do with being tired. His shoulders were lower than usual. His steps were shorter. He didn't go straight to the feeder the way he normally did. He went to the chair first, and he sat down, and he didn't do anything. He just sat. She had seen this before. Not often, but enough times that she had a category for it somewhere in her understanding of this yard, this man, this particular back door with its particular creak. There were mornings when he moved through the yard like he owned it, filling feeders, checking things, present and purposeful. And then there were mornings like this one, when he moved like he was carrying something she couldn't see. She watched him sit. She did not fly away. If you've ever wondered why birds sometimes approach you on the days you least expect it, on the quiet mornings, the hard mornings, the mornings when you went outside not because you wanted to, but because you needed air, there is actually an answer. And it's not the answer most people assume. It's not that birds sense sadness the way a dog might. It's not some mystical connection, though it can feel like one. It's something more specific than that, and in some ways, more remarkable. When you're having a hard day, your body changes. Your movements slow down. Your gestures become smaller, less sudden. You hold yourself differently, lower, more contained. Your voice, if you use it, gets quieter. You stop scanning the environment the way you normally do, that constant low-level alertness most humans carry without knowing it. You become, in a very measurable way, less threatening. And birds notice all of it, every single signal. She wasn't reading his emotions, she was reading his body. But his body was telling her something his face would have told another person. That today, he was not a man moving through the world with force. Today, he was just a man, sitting in a chair, taking up very little space. That matters to a bird. That matters enormously. She shifted on the branch, not toward him yet, just a small adjustment, a recalibration, the kind that happens when something in the environment changes enough to warrant a new assessment. She looked at him directly for a moment, which birds don't always do with humans they aren't sure about.
Direct eye contact from a bird is a form of attention. It means you have been noticed. You are being evaluated. The jury is still out. He didn't look up. That was useful information. A human who doesn't look up when a bird moves nearby is either unaware, which makes them unpredictable, or genuinely still. Not performing stillness, actually still. There's a difference, and she could feel it the way you can feel the difference between someone who is calm and someone who is pretending to be calm. He was actually still. She dropped down to a lower branch, closer, still in the oak, still with a clear exit route in 3 directions. She never positioned herself without a clear exit route. That was non-negotiable. But closer, close enough that if he turned his head slowly, he would see her. He didn't turn his head. She waited. Here is something most people don't know about birds and trust. Trust for a bird is not a feeling. It's a calculation. A continuous, unconscious, remarkably sophisticated calculation that runs every second they're in proximity to something larger than them. Every movement you make either adds to a column or subtracts from it. Over days, weeks, months of watching the same person in the same yard, a bird builds something that functions almost like a profile. She had been building his profile for nearly 2 years. She knew that he moved quickly in the mornings, but slowed down after he'd had his coffee. She knew that he sometimes talked to the birds out loud, which she found neither threatening nor meaningful. Just noise, familiar noise, the kind that had come to mean he was relaxed. She knew that he had never made a sudden movement toward her, never thrown anything, never done that thing some humans did, that lunge, that grab, that reset the calculation to 0 in an instant. He had a good record. A very good record, actually.
And today, in this quieter, slower, smaller version of himself, his record was doing something interesting. Because the signals that usually kept her at a moderate distance, his energy, his purposefulness, the simple fact that he was a large creature moving through her space with intention, those signals were almost absent today. What was left was just the record. 2 years of never being a threat. That's not nothing. In the currency of bird trust, 2 years of never being a threat is worth a great deal. She looked at the arm of the porch chair. She looked at him. She looked at the arm of the chair again. She flew. Not dramatically. Not the way birds fly when they're startled, that explosive burst, all wings and alarm. This was the other kind of flight. The quiet kind. The intentional kind. The kind that looks almost casual if you're not paying attention. 4 seconds from the oak to the arm of the chair. A small landing, neat and unhurried. And then stillness. She was very close to him now.
closer than she had been since the first winter, when he'd held out seed in his open palm and she'd made the calculation that the seed was worth the risk. That had been the first entry in his record, the good kind. He had gone very still when he heard her land. Not frozen, just careful. The particular stillness of someone who understands that something small and alert has decided to trust them, and who doesn't want to be the thing that breaks it. She recognized this stillness. It was different from his earlier stillness. That was the stillness of someone carrying weight. This was the stillness of someone holding their breath for a good reason. She tilted her head. He was looking at her now, from the corner of his eye. Not directly, sideways, as if he knew that looking directly would be too much, would tip some delicate balance. As if, somewhere in whatever humans carry instead of instinct, he understood the rules. She appreciated that. Not consciously. She didn't appreciate things consciously. But in the calculation, it added to his column. They stayed like that for a while, him in the chair, her on the arm of it, both of them doing nothing in particular, both of them completely present in the same small square of morning. If you had been watching from inside the house, it would have looked like a coincidence. She knew it wasn't. There is a moment that happens in every yard, on every ordinary morning, that almost no one ever sees. It happens after the feeders are filled and before the coffee goes cold. It happens in the space between one thing and the next, when the yard is neither empty nor busy, just existing. And in that moment, if you were small enough and quick enough and had been paying attention long enough, you would see what she saw every single day. A yard is not a place, not to a bird. A yard is a network, a living, shifting, constantly updated map of who is safe and who isn't, what has changed and what hasn't, where the food is and where the exits are, and which large, slow creatures can be trusted and which ones still need watching. She carried this map in her body the way you carry the layout of your own house in yours, without thinking, without effort, just knowing. And she knew this yard the way she knew her own feathers. She knew that the cat from 2 houses over came through the gap in the fence on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, always from the left, always moving toward the bird bath first. She knew that the family next door had a child who ran and screamed and was not dangerous, but required extra distance. She knew that the wind came from the northwest before rain and from the south before heat, and that the oak she sat in held warmth longer than the maple at the property line, which made it the better choice on cold mornings when sitting still was necessary. She knew all of it. And she knew him. That was the part that mattered today. She watched him from the arm of the chair. He still hadn't moved much. His hands were around a mug now, both of them, which she had noticed he only did on certain mornings. On the fast mornings, the purposeful mornings, he held the mug in one hand and used the other for things. Today, both hands were occupied with holding, like the mug was something he needed to keep track of, like letting go wasn't an option. She had no framework for grief, no concept of it, no word for it, no category in her understanding of the world that corresponded to what was happening inside him. But she had a category for what his body was doing, and what his body was doing was something she recognized from other living things, in other moments, in this yard, and in others. It was the posture of something that had been still for too long and hadn't yet decided to move again. She knew that posture.
She had worn it herself, Briefly, once, in a winter 2 years ago, when something had gone wrong with the flock and she had found herself alone in an unfamiliar part of the neighborhood, sitting on a cold wire with no clear direction and no clear plan. That stillness, that particular quality of pause that wasn't rest. She hadn't liked it. She had made a decision, eventually, and moved. She looked at him. He didn't know that she was doing anything other than sitting there. He probably thought she had landed by chance, or for the warmth, or because birds sometimes did inexplicable things that meant nothing. Most humans thought that. Most humans looked at a bird and saw a small, random creature making small, random choices. And they were wrong about that in almost every possible way. Nothing she did was random. Every landing was a decision. Every approach was a calculation. Every moment of staying when she could have left was a choice, made fresh, in real time, based on everything she knew and everything she was currently observing. She was choosing to stay. She was choosing right now to be here. And if you are someone who has ever had a bird sit close to you on a hard morning and felt something move through you that you couldn't quite name, I want you to understand something about that moment. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. That bird knew you were there. That bird had been watching you, probably for longer than you realize, building a record of who you are and how you move and whether you are the kind of creature that can be trusted. And on that morning, for whatever combination of reasons, the answer was yes. That's not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the more honest forms of trust you will ever be offered. The morning was getting lighter. She could feel it before she could see it. A shift in the air, a change in the quality of sound as the yard moved from the silence of early morning into the tentative noise of the day beginning. Other birds were waking up. She could hear the chickadees in the hedge at the far end of the yard, their quick, sharp calls bouncing off each other in the way they did when they were checking in, making sure everyone had made it through the night. She thought about joining them, briefly. Then she looked at him again. He was watching the yard now, not the way he usually watched it, that active, scanning attention that took inventory, noted things to do. He was watching it the way you watch something when you need it to just be there. When the act of looking at something ordinary and continuing is itself what you need. She understood that too. Not the grief, not the cause, but the need for the ordinary to hold still. She stayed. The chickadees called again. She registered the call, filed it, let it go. Her attention remained here, on this small patch of porch, this specific square of morning, this man who had filled her feeder through 2 winters without ever once making her feel unsafe. There was something she could give him, and it wasn't comfort in any sense he could have articulated. It was presence. Just presence. The simple fact of another living thing choosing, freely, without obligation, to remain. If that sounds like a small thing, you have never sat alone on a hard morning and had something small and alive decide to stay near you. It is not a small thing. It is, sometimes, exactly enough. He shifted in the chair eventually. Not much, just a small adjustment of his weight, the kind of movement that happens when a body has been still for long enough that it needs to remind itself it's still capable of moving. She tensed, checked her exits, stayed. He noticed. She saw him notice. That careful pause, that deliberate non-movement in response to her tension. He was still learning the rules after 2 years, still figuring out the vocabulary, but he was trying. She gave him credit for trying. His record, already good, added another entry. He looked at her properly then, not from the corner of his eye anymore, directly. And she let him, which was itself a thing she didn't do lightly, because direct eye contact from a human was still something her body treated as a variable that needed monitoring. But she had enough data on him now, in this specific moment, to allow it. They looked at each other. There was nothing mystical about it. She was not sending him a message. She was not, in any conscious way, trying to help. She was a bird, sitting on a chair, in a yard she knew well, next to a creature she had spent 2 years deciding she could trust. But if there was something that passed between them in that moment of direct looking, something that the science of signal reading and behavioral calculation doesn't quite cover, she couldn't have named it. She didn't have names for things. She just knew that she didn't look away, and neither did he. Here is what I want you to take with you from this. The next time a bird comes close, on a morning when you needed something to come close, know that it was not an accident. Know that you earned that. Not today, not in that single moment, but over weeks and months of being present in your yard in a way that registered. Every time you moved carefully, every time you filled the feeder without making sudden movements, every time you sat outside and just existed without demanding anything from the space around you. You were building a record, and birds keep very, very accurate records. The bird that sat near you on your hard morning knew things about you that you might not know about yourself. It knew that you were capable of stillness. It knew that you could be trusted with something small and alert and alive. It knew that your worst days made you, in at least one measurable way, easier to be near. That's not nothing. That might actually be something worth knowing. If this made you think about a bird that has come close to you, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. Not because I'm asking you to, but because those stories are remarkable every single time, and you probably haven't told anyone about it because it's hard to explain without sounding like you're reading too much into things. You're not reading too much into things. She flew eventually. When the yard had fully woken up and the calculation shifted, too much movement, too much noise, the optimal window for this particular kind of closeness had passed. She went back to the oak, third branch from the bottom, slightly left of center. She looked back at him once. He was still in the chair, but he was sitting differently now. A little less like something carrying weight. A little more like someone who had been reminded, by nothing more than the presence of a small bird on a chair arm, that the morning was still there, and still ordinary, and still, against all evidence to the contrary, worth being in. She didn't know she had done that, but she had. And somewhere in the back of whatever you call a bird's memory, in the part that keeps the records and tracks the patterns and updates the map of who can be trusted and who cannot, she filed this morning away. Good morning, quiet man. Stayed close. No threat. See you tomorrow.